Okay, we're back behind the camera here, and we're going to be adjusting the throttle servo to limit its range, because if you watch right now, the quick connect is not tightened down. So I'm going to move the throttle, and you can see, you know, that's too big a range. Remember, the measurement that I measured in terms of the throw of the servo arm was about 18 millimeters, and that's way too big. So what we're going to do is we're going to set the throttle to 50%. And that's close enough to 50%. And right about there. Okay, so now what I'm going to do is show you how to adjust the endpoints, it's called. So on the radio, I'm going to go into servo setup, and down here where it says travel adjust, I'm going to click on travel adjust. Okay, and that starts flashing. Now I'm going to move the throttle to idle. Okay, or not too idle, but close enough to idle. That throttle moved back, you can see that moved back a little bit. Okay, so now what I want to do is limit the bottom part of the travel. So I'm going to guess, I'm going to just cut it in half. Instead of 100%, I'm going to use 50%. Okay, now as I did that, I'll go back to 100%. You can see the arm moving. That's 100%, and now I'm going to go back to 50%. So I'm moving the arm toward the middle. That's 50%. Now I'm going to move the stick up, okay, until the little square here is on the other 100%, which is the upside. I'm going to click on that and move it down to 50%. I'm going to start with about 50-50, and then we're going to see, by virtue of measurement, exactly what we got. So I'm going to pull the throttle to idle. Okay. And that should be at about 18 millimeters, right about there. I'll push this up to 100%, and that moved about 18 millimeters. So it's close. Now here's what we're going to do next to get it. That's the rough approximation. So now full stick travel is limiting the arm to that approximately 20 millimeters. Okay. So now I'm going to stop the camera and move it over to the front. Alright, next thing to do is to connect the push rod clevis. Okay, and I'm going to take my little measurement stick here. I'm going to measure, I'm going to pull this back, okay, and I'm going to move it forward until it's at 9 millimeters, about halfway. That's halfway, that's all the way, that's about halfway. Okay, now with that halfway, that in place, I can, and the stick at 50%, okay, make sure it's right at 50%. Then I'm going to tighten the quick connect. So it's at 50%. Okay, so now what we're going to do is see, we're going to zoom in on the throat here. See if that'll focus any better. And I have to zoom out a little bit to focus. go. And so I'm going to move the stick to full. And that's close. I'm going to move the stick to idle. And that's not quite there because remember, I've got the trim set to neutral. Let me zoom back out. So notice that the trim is neutral. So what I'm going to do is close the trim, and as I do that, you can see I'm going to move it back to 50%. Okay, so that's 50%. I'm going to close the trim all the way down. And with the trim all the way down, that needs to be 100% closed. So that means I need to change the bottom. So with the throttle back to here, I want the throttle right there. Okay, so I'm going to go into the servo setup here, change the bottom setting to, instead of, we had it at 50, I'm going to move it down to like 40%. Okay, now I'm going to pull the stick all the way back, and that closed, actually that's closed, it's not, it's going too far. I need to probably limit it some more. I'm going to go down to 30%, maybe 35. I can hear the servo. Yeah, that's all right. I must try 30. Now, there's still a little bit of a crack there. I'm going to go back up to, crack disappears, and that crack disappeared at 33, maybe 34. There we go, I like that, 34. Now I'll go back up to 50%, and now I'll go up to like 75%, and that's going way up a little bit. I'm going to close that down to about 40. Alright, that's not quite open enough. So I'm going to slide that open until it's 50 might work. Alright, so now what you can see is, I'm going to zoom back out. Now I want you to watch two things here. See how the number's here, and watch where the throttle is. Throttle's at 44. I'm going to move the throttle, that's idle, and that's closed because the trim is full back. So I'm going to move that up, and then so you can watch over here on the monitor, okay, as I go up and down. That's limited, and as this goes up to 50%, that's where the 50% mark was. Okay, so I'm back to 50%. Actually, I need to do one other thing here before I do that. I'm going to go back to the, forgot, 30. Okay, so I'm going to go back to the main screen here and move the trim all the way back to 50%, because that's idle. And now you can see me zoom back in. With the throttle at idle, that's got a crack open on it. Okay, so that's what idle looks like, and this will be adjusted after we run the airplane and get the RPM. So we're going to do a second one on this. We're just getting close here. So that's idle. I'm going to pull the trim all the way back. Okay, the throat closed, and it's completely closed. So I'm going to move it back up to, trim back up to 50%. Now if I need a bit more, I got all that. That's way more than I need for idle. So 50% trim is there, and that's 100% throw of the stick. That's 100% down of the stick. So when the stick is 100% down, you want a little bit opening for idle, and I think that's a good place to start. So now let me zoom back out. So those two settings of 50 and 33, as long as they are you know, the right endpoints, they don't have to be evenly matched. So I'm going to live with that. And we've got the throttle arm limited in its travel. Sometimes this is called travel adjust on this radio. Other radios call it endpoint adjustment. And so the travel is limited to just what the throttle needs to open and close, and have an idle. That's idle. And oops. Okay, so that's idle. That's 100%. That's idle. That's more idle if we need it. That's idle all the way closed to cut the engine. Okay. Okay, I think that's it. Thank you. Okay, back behind the camera again, and this will be the last step for the throttle push rod installation. And last thing we need to do is make sure that the little plastic tube here, there, doesn't move. At each end of the plastic tube I've got a little clamp so the plastic tube won't move. And it's at my marks. I had a mark down by the servo. I had a mark up by the firewall to make sure that where the plastic tube should be. And now we're going to keep it in place by adding some low temperature hot melt glue. And you can see it right there. I'm going to just drop a good little glob of that right there. And I got a little stick to get rid of the little extra. And that should work there. Let me move the camera just a little bit, and I'm going to put a little hot melt glue at the tank support just to keep it there. It's probably going to be in the way, but we'll see. I'm going to put a little on both sides. Use the stick to smear it around a little bit, get the excess off. And hot melt glue does like to make spider webs. So I'm going to let that sit for a minute and then make sure it's going to stay there. I think it will. I also decided not to put any up by the firewall here because as the servo moves and the push rod moves the clevis, this plastic tube needs to move up and down inside that slot. So that's not going to get any glue on it. 2 glue points should be enough. Thank you.